Welcome to our Zoom conversation to celebrate the opening of Frieze Sculpture at Rockefeller Center. I am here with the curator of Frieze Sculpture at Rockefeller Center, Brett Littman, who is also the director of the Isamu Noguchi Foundation and Garden Museum in Long Island City, New York. This is Brett's second year with us. Last year was the inaugural edition of Frieze Sculpture at Rockefeller Center. This year, as many of you know, Frieze Sculpture is usually held in the spring as part of the wider programming of Frieze New York, but it was postponed and readapted this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're really grateful to all of the artists who stuck with us through this kind of long and arduous process of rethinking and reinventing what we were doing this year. But it has turned out to be an amazing outdoor, responsibly, socially distanced program. And I encourage any of you who are in New York or the surrounding area to please do come down to Rockefeller Center and to walk around the plaza and to see what everybody has done. I do want to say I am very sorry. Again, my name is Lauren Randolph. I neglected to tell you that earlier, but I'm the director of programming for Frieze in New York. I am sorry that we can't all be together in person. Normally we're standing on the plaza and able to greet everybody, and Brett does these sort of amazing impromptu walkthroughs with the public of of what's happening. But there are audio guides that you can download if you visit frieze.com. There is also a map. Also, Rockefeller Center has the map walking you through everything. And this year, for the second iteration, it is sort of a special program that we've put together, mostly of site-specific works by three of the artists who are here, Ghada Amer, Andy Goldsworthy, and Thaddeus Mosley, but also including Beatriz Cortez, Lena Henke, and Camille Henrot. And they run from Fifth Avenue up the Channel Gardens all the way to the 30 Rock Plaza, and also inside that entryway to 30 Rock, where Camille Henrot also has work. So again, that is open to the public, and I encourage you to come down. We are only able to do this because of our relationship and partnership with Tishman Speyer. This is, a significant undertaking that Rockefeller Center goes through in order to put this free kind of major sculptural exhibition on that is open to the public all over their site. And we are hugely grateful to them. And I wanted to especially thank the manager of the project, Lorna Simpson, Mikhail Solar-March, Jody, Eric Paz, who really went out of his way to help make the garden project with Ghada Amer happen. And he's also in charge of the Christmas tree, and he's sort of a gardening genius, so we were really excited to get to know him. Also, all of the staff at Tishman, the people who are the security people, and everybody who's helped us, just, thank you again. And thank you to all of the artists and all the galleries who have participated this year. We have with us today also Victoria Siddall, who's our global director, and our CEO, Simon Fox. And I know they wanted to say a quick hello to everybody.
Hi, I'm Victoria, speaking to you from London, wishing I was at Rockefeller Center today to see this presentation that looks so extraordinary. I've only seen images of it, as have many of you so far, I imagine, but I hope that you will get to see it in person. I remain optimistic that I may get to see it in person, but in the meantime, just want to say a huge thank you to Andy, Ghada, and Thaddeus for being with us today, to Brett, for curating this, and of course to Lauren, whose brilliant idea all of this was 2 years ago. It's an incredible undertaking, and yeah, enormously grateful to everybody involved. So thank you. I'm going to switch my video off so you can get on with the more interesting part of this panel. So back over to you, Lauren.
I also wanted to give a quick thank you to Lifewater for sponsoring the Frieze Sculpture Prize this year at Rockefeller Center, the winner of which was Beatriz Cortez. And without their support, we would not have been able to realize her amazing sculpture, which was the last sculpture that went up last night until 4 or 5 a.m. And there's more information about that, obviously, on our website and in the audio guide. So nobody wants to listen to me, so I'm going to turn it over to Brett and to Ghada, Andy, and Thaddeus. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, I'm Brett Littman. I'm the director of the Isamu Noguchi Foundation and Garden Museum in Long Island City, and also the curator of Frieze Sculpture 2020. This is the second year that I've worked on the project. Obviously, this year the conditions were very different than last year, and also my thinking was very different even from the get-go. When we completed last year's project, Laurie and I started talking about what we could do for 2020 that would be different. Last year, I really thought about the architecture of the site and the location of the artwork, contemporary work in relationship to historical murals and other artworks, and also to the kind of Art Deco architecture of the buildings, the presence of the buildings, the scale, and really what it would mean to put actually what I felt was a human-sized and human-scaled sculpture park in the middle of an urban environment. This year, from the get-go, I started to think a lot about sculpture, moving sculpture, actually what sculpture means in relationship to the environment. I've been doing a lot of reading, of course, because I sit at the Noguchi Museum and my office looks down at the very beautiful garden that Noguchi designed for the museum, what the relationship of art to and aesthetics to gardens were and to nature. And thinking through Noguchi's ideas about the harmonious, or what should be the harmonious, or sometimes disconcerting relationships between sculpture and nature. How does one navigate that, particularly in the urban environment? At one point, I think I had said to Lauren that I wanted to kind of do maybe the first green sculpture park, maybe only work with artists who wanted to work with biological or biodegradable materials so that sculptures could simply disappear. But of course, we're working with Frieze and we're working with an art fair, so not exactly saleable things, that's difficult, but just to think through what that would look like. Obviously, one of the things that I've learned at the Noguchi Museum is when we move sculptures, there's a huge carbon footprint for any kind of sculpture work. There are trucks and shipping things and whatever. So, in some ways, how would we get back to this idea of a really kind of symbiotic relationship between the sculptural world, the aesthetics of sculpture, and the natural world, and again, put that in the middle of New York. That all said, we ended up doing an open call which dealt with the idea of gardens, or at least of the idea of biological or natural materials. I think the three projects that we're going to talk about today, Thaddeus's project, Ghada's project, and Andy's projects represent very well what that relationship could look like. And as we continued, we ended up in the pandemic, and we had to kind of cut the project down a little bit. I mean, originally we actually were going to work with about 14 artists. Currently we're working with 6 because of social distancing rules. I think that the 6 artists that we continued to work with end up really forming a kind of backbone or spine of the project intellectually, and give us a real sense of that initial impulse of that exploring nature through sculpture. But one of the things that's happened to me personally, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I think in terms of a moment of self-care as we kind of go through the pandemic, I grew up in New York City. I get nervous if I hear too many crickets in the evening. I mean, I like to hear like cars and trucks and things. But actually, for me, in the past couple of months, I've been going out and taking walks in nature, and actually going to visit a lot of gardens about an hour or 2 hours outside of New York. I have to say that that's become a real point of solace for me, and actually a point of self-care. And thinking about that relationship, being a city dweller to nature, has been something that's really been on my mind a lot. And so I'm really happy in a way that this public sculpture project can kind of bring that to the fore in some way on a very personal level. And I hope for people that want to come out and see the projects, that there would be this kind of sense of the ghost of the nature and the atavistic sense of what New York looked like. If you know the history of New York, Rockefeller Center actually was farmland at one point. It was a garden. Further up on the west side, the Dakota building is called the Dakota because that was like going to North Dakota from downtown. So New York City actually was quite a natural environment in the 17th, 18th century. And I think that in some ways we forget that as we walk through the city. But I hope that this project brings back and gives us a sense of that, almost a ghost sense of that. And I think, again, as we talk today about the 3 projects that we have, maybe you'll be able to understand a little bit more deeply how these projects were initiated, what the artists were thinking about. And maybe at the end, we can talk a little bit about what the aesthetics are of sustainability and also of ecological consciousness and what that might mean in the future for us. Because I think the art world is going to change. I think that artists are changing and thinking about things in new ways. And maybe this sculpture project can be a starting point. So if we can start now, I want to start with Thaddeus Mosley, an artist that I had the opportunity to meet personally last year. I came out to Pittsburgh one day in January of 2019 to actually, no, earlier than that. It was later than that, excuse me. I think it was 2020 to meet Thaddeus. And we ended up spending the day together. I visited his studio. And I'm really, really proud that we were able to work together to create Thaddeus's first bronze edition sculptures. So Thaddeus Mosley is, Thaddeus, you turned 94 this year?
Yes, 94, July 23rd, yeah.
Happy birthday. Thaddeus has been working for more than 60 years, mostly in wood that's been scavenged or taken from forests in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. Thaddeus works in a kind of organic way. The wood is often not cured and is still alive. So, you know, Thaddeus is working and building things, and I think is very interested in the idea of weight and gravity. And Thaddeus, could you talk a little bit about the slide that we're looking at now, which is really the first time that you've put together a big kind of outdoor installation of work? I mean, you've had some other works that are outdoors, but this is kind of a massive installation for you.
Yes, this is the first time I've done 5 or 7 sculptures for outside. Ingrid Schaffner, who was the curator for the Carnegie International, she picked this spot, which is in the lobby of the Carnegie Museum. So she wanted inside, outside, and which I had never thought about before. So I did the 7 sculptures for outside first. As you can see, I designed them so they would be, weather could go around them. Of course, they have many coats of different stuff so that they would survive through the different types of weather.
And Thaddeus, what were some of the challenges for you? I mean, you know, since the wood that you work with, again, is kind of alive, here you obviously had to maybe varnish or, you know, put on some extra kind of material on the outside. You also had to have drainage, a little bit of drainage, so you put them on a grate. You had to think about quite a few things in order to make this installation work.
Well, again, I think Ingrid, she thought of the grates, and of course, I thought of mainly how the, of course, basically sculpture, but as you can see, there's a couple of very low benches which are designed so that they collect water and let it flow off slowly. And as if you had the winter, you can see the sculpture in winter. Then you can see the one tall piece that's tree-like called branches that wind could blow through, because we did not, you know, Pittsburgh isn't hurricane proof, but we do have some heavy storms, and I didn't want any of these things to end up in the lobby of the museum. So
yeah, that would be unwanted. So if we could go to the next slide. So Thaddeus, you recently opened up a show at Karma Gallery in New York, and this is probably one of the largest groups of sculptures that you've put together. These are mostly relatively new, maybe the last 2-3 years. Maybe there were some that were a little older. It was a very exciting moment. I was at the opening. It's a great show. What were your feelings about showing these in New York?
Well, I was very happy to show with Karma, and they've done, and they displayed the things admirably, because I was very worried. I came up a day early because, maybe 2 days early, because most people have a difficult time rejoining these sculptures and setting them up and make sure they don't fall over, because they're balanced and they're fitted as sort of like puzzles. And if you're not used to putting them together, even after a period of time, if I haven't shown them, I don't remember how they go back. I have to really take my time and draw a little map. But as you look to the further sculpture to the left, that was the last piece that was done in June 2019. I remember because that was the last day they came to pick up the sculptures, and that was new. So Ingrid said, "Can we have that one too?" I said, "You can have anybody you want." So she picked that one. That was the last.
If you ever have the chance to visit Thaddeus in Pittsburgh, he's got a great studio in the basement of a building and totally filled with wood and also with sculptures spanning many, many years. It's really almost like a private museum. So Thaddeus, I want to ask you, how long have you kind of been dreaming about having the ability to have outdoor work? I mean, to cast in bronze. Is this something you've been thinking about for a long time?
Well, I haven't, but talking to Brendan about showing outside and talking to other people, I only have one really large outdoor piece that was done by urban design architects in the Hill District in Pittsburgh, and that's in cedar wood, which is the same type of wood the Englets and the artists from the Pacific Northwest use. So cedar, this piece has stood up since 79, so it's been quite durable. Of course, we've coated it often with water seal and other materials, just like we've done for the pieces that were in the Carnegie. But I'm very happy and thrilled about us thinking about this going into bronze, because also the pieces can be replicated far more easily than me making another sculpture.
Yeah, I mean, I must say that Thaddeus, I hope when and if you get to New York, UAP, which used to be Talix, helped you to fabricate these. They've done an incredible job replicating the wood grain. So and also the patina is unbelievably good on these sculptures. So you really get the simulacra, the kind of the feel of the wood. You don't lose that at all, which is really important. They don't feel like bronze when you see them at first.
Yeah, I got samples of the process while they were making the sculpture, and I was very happy about the choices. And so again, I guess I'm very lucky in many ways, but I'm happy that they hope people will enjoy them.
Yeah, well, I think they will. Can we go to the last slide, which is the project installed? We installed it 2 nights ago. Actually, next slide, yeah. And it is in really the prime location on 5th Avenue, right when you pass Rockefeller Center, kind of dead center against 30 Rock, on a very tall plinth. So now they're standing about, at the highest, about 15 feet tall. An array of 3 different sculptures that are based on the original wood sculptures that you made, Thaddeus. And they look quite spectacular. It's really interesting to see these kind of abstract forms in the kind of urban grid. So any thoughts that you have about seeing that image?
I like it very much, and I'm really happy that they chose the pieces that they did, because there's only one older piece, which is to the right. The last 2, the man in the middle is the most recent piece, but also the variety that shows that I'm just not a one-line thinker. So I'm happy the way they look, and I think that it creates a nice entryway to the show and to the architecture.
Well, thank you, Thaddeus. It's a wonderful piece. Again, I hope that everyone gets a chance to come out and see it. It looks great in the day, but it also looks fantastic at night. So let's go on to Ghada Amer. Thank you, Thaddeus. You can.
Thank you.
Don't go away, though. We're going to need you in a couple of minutes. So if we could go to the next slide, please, with Ghada's images. Ghada, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. So Ghada, you and I have known each other for a pretty long time. I think I probably first met you when you were at Gagosian Gallery working with them, and kind of knew your work as a painter, also working with textile, with thread. The works that you were doing, these kind of hypersexualized female images. And to be frank, Ghada, I mean, I know that you worked in ceramics and did other things, but the gardens are a little bit of a kind of anomaly and a little bit of a revelation, even for me. I mean, I saw some images in the past, but it is a kind of interesting side path, or not even side path. I mean, it's part of your work, but it's an interesting other way of thinking. So could you talk a little bit about how you started to think about gardens in 1997 and maybe what gardens mean to you?
Yeah, can you
If we
go
could
back?
stay on the first slide, if you don't mind, and we'll go through to the next. Thanks.
I mean, I have been working with garden outdoor sculpture since 23 years now.
Yeah.
And it has been a very important practice of my work, but because it's of the galleries and because I don't know, there was no interest really, apart from very little curators, and especially Rosa Martinez, who really pushed me who invited me every year for 10 years to do a new garden so that I can have like this practice. But I first started in 1997. I was actually going to France to visit a space, an art center. And I started already when with my embroidered painting to do embroidered sculpture. I've always liked to do sculpture in the same time than painting and not just one thing. And then, so I thought they would invite me to show this. So, and I would go to choose the space. I don't know, this is what I was thinking. And the curator, he told me, no, it's outside. Your space is outside. And I looked at him, I said, no, outside I cannot put my embroidered sculpture because it will be wet and it will be destroyed. And then he said, no, but I don't want to put your embroidered sculpture. You have to do something outside. Then I told him, no, but I don't do this. I am not a sculptor and I don't like this sculpture, big sculpture in the nature. The nature is beautiful. Why should I interfere? And then he told me, I don't care. You are going to stay here until you find an idea. And then he left. And he really, I was in the middle of nowhere. And then I was like, what is this, And then I looked at the nature. I love, I grew up in the south of France and I love, and I was like, what can I do that is going to compete with this? I cannot do anything. I always had a problem with this large object in the middle of a beautiful nature. So I started to think about this and about my work. And then I said to myself, what can I do outside that is a little bit a woman, like statement, and as outside. So I said, gardening. So I was very, very happy. I said, and then he's going to be upset. I was sure he's going to be upset because it is totally not something that he would expect. He wanted me to do a sculpture. I'm going to make a sculpture, but with plants. So he came and I told him, I'm going to do a garden. And I was sure he's going to throw me or something. And then he was, oh, fantastic.
That's a great origin story. I didn't even know that. So good for the curator for leaving you outside and letting you figure this out.
Yeah, exactly, for 2 days. And then I was like, okay, I had this idea. I had an idea of the garden. This garden never worked. I even tried it twice because it was my first. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I like those daisies where you say, he loves me not. Yeah. In France, you have, he loves me a little bit, he loves me, like the 7 stages, not loves me, loves me not. So I planted a huge square of daisies, and then I wanted people to come and then to take the daisy and then just like make he loves me not, and then put the rose bud, the bud of the daisies in a drawing, and then of course lovers, and it will be the bud of the daisies will make the drawing. Of course it didn't work because I needed like 100,000 of visitors to do this. Right. So this, and then I was like a little disappointed because I like the idea of I like to do it, but then I said, okay, I cannot do sculpture. And then Rosa Martinez, the next year, she invited me, she called me and then she told me, I'm not interested in your painting. I want you to do something outdoors. I told her, no, I tried it doesn't work. And then she told me, no, but it's a great idea. I want it. Let's try something else. And then this was in 99. And then I did the cactus painting. Not this one, outdoor in Sagunt. I used to travel in the most remote places because it was something new, and I worked with, like, Rosa was not as famous as she is now. She was like beginning, so we went to Sagunt, and then I did this garden, and then the people who the city gave us money. They stopped the money because they thought it was crazy, so it was never finished. So it was the first one in 2000 was cactus painting, unfinished, and I took this pattern of abstract painters with cactus, and the cactus has to be small. Of course, it's a critique of the big abstract expressionist painters, as always. And then in 2017, I got invited back in tour with proper funding to do my cactus painting, which I did here. It's not in outdoor because the climate in Tours cannot support this cactus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's interesting, Ghada, because obviously we did spend a lot of time in your garden in New York, thinking about the time that it was going to be installed, since we had to postpone. We even had to change almost all the flowers. I mean, it is something you have to think about depending on the time of year. If we can go to the next couple of slides, and maybe, Ghada, quickly, as we go through, we're going to kind of do a quick little run through of some of the garden projects that you've done.
Yeah, and this is in Santa Fe, 99 as well. And this is Women's Quality, the same garden that I'm installing in Korea, 2001, I did. So Rosa invited me in Korea, and then she told me, you have these 7 lots to do something. So I decided to make a poll around the museum and ask men and women to tell me woman quality. What do they think about woman quality? And then I would make a poll, and then at the end I chose the 7 quality that was the most recurrent. And in 2001 in Korea, because it's a very site-specific, culture-specific work actually. So this was like the made with this one flower that flowers once for 2 months in the summer. And some of the quality was like submissive, sexy, presenting well the food, existing eyelashes, and I did cheat in this garden. I put intelligent because I was like very nobody has said intelligent, so I put it.
So you added your own word.
Yeah, here, yes. Then in New York, I didn't add. From New York was a very interesting but this is I did.
Yeah, let's go to the slides of New York, if you don't mind. We're going to go kind of towards the end.
Yeah.
Of the slides. We'll continue. Keep on going, please. Ghada, you can continue to talk. If you could.
Okay.
Slides, yeah.
This about what? About like the.
Oh, sorry. Do you want to talk about the Mexico? I wanted to kind of get us to the point where we'll get up to Rockefeller Center.
Okay.
So let's stop with the slide with Ghada standing at the garden first, if you don't mind, please. Go back one slide. Because the 2 projects are linked in a way, Ghada, right? We have women's qualities that you did in South Korea, and then we've redone it now for New York.
Yeah, it's 20 years apart, actually. Project is 20 years. For New York, I redid the poll. I asked people to tell me the women's quality, and then I have 17 planters. And I like the idea as well to show the fountain, because it's very, so I asked the people to tell me quality, and then I put them in those planters with the specific plants of the season and of New York, of course. And it was very interesting to see the difference of answers compared to Korea in 2001 and compared to New York, which is very much like with the Me Too, post-Me Too movement, where they were like creating a Wonder Woman and not really saying the qualities. I felt a little bit like there were some okay, the woman has to be perfect, like in terms of how society wants the woman, because she is developed, as if suddenly the woman became developed and then independent, and this is like Wonder Woman quality.
Well, it's interesting, Ghada, to kind of take the difference that, and again, because it's site specific, even though it's the same concept, the words are totally different, the meaning is totally different, the location really changes, and the people that you interview obviously affect the project in a very deep way.
Yeah.
one of the other things, Ghada, is that you kind of explained to me when you were explaining to me what the garden would look like, that like one of the things that inspired you is one of those signs that you might see outside of an airport, like "I love New York" in flowers. You know, so a kind of kitschy, a little bit like lowbrow sense of what flower words can be. So I really kind of laughed because that made a very clear image in my mind of, you know, this kind of words made out of flowers. That is something that you're interested in this project a little bit.
For this project, absolutely. Yeah. I always loved I always loved everything with flowers, like sculpture with flowers. I always thought it was, and then this for me, I see it like this. I don't know, like this.
Yeah, my dream was that we were going to be able to have plants that you could eat. So that this would be an edible garden. That would have been really special.
This was the first idea, like the herbs, but it was the summer. That's why.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually have drawn an edible garden. I've never done this. I'm waiting to have funds to do it for Spain.
Okay.
Like it's a farm. It's a kind of a farm inside the city.
Got it. Thank you. I'm going to come back to you in just a couple of minutes. Thank you again for working with me on this. And I really hope that everyone gets a chance to come and see. This is Ghada holding up the plants and then the final product today. And everything is beautifully trimmed and the fountains will be on. And I think it's going to be a wonderful project for people to walk through. So now if we can turn to Andy Goldsworthy. So Andy is an artist that I deeply admire. I have seen a lot of his projects in sculpture parks and in museums around the world. I was kind of, in a way, very lucky that through Gallery Lalong was able to communicate with Andy and ask him if he wanted to come to Rockefeller Center. Really not thinking that, Andy, you would have time to do this project, but you did kind of say, I'd like to come and take a look. And we did spend a half a day walking around, and you walked around for quite a bit. So Andy, could you talk a little bit about what your initial thoughts were about Rockefeller Center and how Red Flags, the project, we're going to be watching a clip of a video of the flags kind of flying in your studio in Scotland. What your thoughts were in that initial site visit?
Well, it was, it was an unusual place for me to work in many ways, although I have worked in New York City many times. But Rockefeller Center itself is a tough place to make a work. You know, it's a very busy place to be in. I don't mean with people, but just visually busy and a lot going on. And I think it was your suggestion that I look at the flags. And I think you said, well, they are all the world flags. But actually, when we were there, it was the flags of all the states of America.
Right.
And the idea of using the flag as a material became kind of interesting. It was kind of quite a challenge. And I guess within about an hour of being there, I thought, well, I could still represent the states, but rather than the symbol of the flag of each state, I used the earth from each state. And that was one of those moments. I think that I drew up the proposal that weekend, sent it to you on the Sunday, and it was agreed on the Monday in November, which was really very, very fast, but really important because this was in November and I was about to try and collect earth from all over America somehow.
Right, with an April deadline at that time, so it was already tight.
Yeah, no, it was a very, and that was also part of it as well. And then I decided that there should be red earths too, and that set this kind of aim of finding the red and the flags representing not just the state, but also the connected color of red that runs through many countries.
And we had also talked a little bit about the symbolism of flags. I think you had mentioned that you had read a book not so long ago about maybe family crests or the idea of what a flag represents, you know, so it's kind of interesting that the flag itself obviously also as a kind of symbol or signal for certain things.
Yes, the author I was referred to as Tim Marshall, and he's written a book on prisons of geography and walls and flags, and they're all subjects that I have dealt with as an artist. But I do have problems with flags as well as an attraction to them. I mean, I've had issues on my sites when I'm making the big sculptures. I got crews from England and I got some from Scotland sometimes. Well, the Scottish started putting Scottish flags up, then the English started putting English flags up, and it was starting to look like a scene from Braveheart, So it was I banned flags from my own sites because, and I'm obviously I do not feel any nationalist tendencies whatsoever. So the idea of using a flag that is also an anti-flag in many ways, it's the things that connect, and they're not identifiable in the obvious way of being the symbol of a state or a cause or whatever. They are a color, and so there's a sort of subversiveness in the work as well.
So Andy, could you walk us through how did you collect the red sand or red dirt from all the states? I mean, this was a huge undertaking.
Yeah, like any of these things, they are ideas that take you on a journey that you have no idea how you're going to make, that you're indeed going to complete the journey. It was a fairly ambitious idea, but I felt we could do it. And after being in New York, I went on to Kansas City, where I was making the Walking Wall project. And so how do I collect all these red earths? It would obviously involve asking people, contacting people, explaining to them what I want, and sending off all these people in search of red. But before that could happen, I felt I should figure out what this involves. So being in Kansas, in the Midwest, was quite fortunate. So I had Missouri, Oklahoma, Kansas, within close proximity. So I started looking at Google Earth, looking for red on Google Earth, which led me into all sorts of strange places. You find this fantastic purple from the sky in a field, and I arrived there and realized it's a chrysanthemum field, And so I started. I had to learn how to read the earth from above, looking for construction sites, from quarries, places where the earth had been turned over. And then when I get there, often the red had been gone because it'd been built up, and it's completely gone. And that's a wonderful thing about the red. It's like a cut or a wound that's so almost violent when it's done, and then it heals over like a wound. And one of the reasons for choosing the red earth, and it's a color, particularly the earth that I've worked with all my life. And living here in Scotland, we have a red stone and red earth around where I live. As a reason it's red is because of its iron content, which is a reason our blood is red too. So there's very strong kind of human connection to the color. So this project isn't just about the red of the flag, it's about the human connection to that color, to that flag, to this place, to this landscape.
Yeah, well, I think that, when you start thinking about the kind of human connections and the network of people involved in even collecting the red earth around the country, you really end up seeing this kind of beautiful network system of many, many people together, of humans working together at a time of a lot of, divisiveness and complications in our own country. It's a kind of beautiful metaphor of a way that people can work together. And you did call the project Red Flags, but I do have to say that when you go and see them at Rockefeller Center, Loring and I were talking about this morning, they're very calming. They don't feel aggressive. They feel actually, you go everything from pink to a kind of darkish red, but they beautifully fit into the urban environment in a way that's both sublime, but that brings your attention to what is this and what are these flags? What are they doing? So it's quite successful. Andy, in terms of how did you actually make the flags themselves? I think people would be interested to know the process.
Well, I collected four of the red earths to begin with, so that was what I brought back with me, and I could figure out how I was going to work them, how they would go into the flags. We got a flag maker from America that makes all the flags for the Rockefeller Center to make us the blank flags. So I had the canvases, and it's canvas, so there's this painterly connection to the work too. They are 8 foot by 4 foot canvases. And the earths were just, I started just rubbing them into with my hands. All of them were done by myself, rubbing the earth into the canvas. And prior to that, we would grind up the material to get as much color out of it as possible. So it was a whole learning process. And you can imagine that when earth starts arriving, the opening up the box, and you know, I asked for red, but you can see there's some in there that are not like red at all. And those ones often came with red written on them. You know, the people were so insistent it was red that as long as they put a label on to say it was red, I was going to believe it was red. And then people would send me pictures of the earth they'd collected. And I do photography. I could see when they turned the red button up, you know, like everything in the picture is red, you know. But that was kind of important, and it was important to look for red, that it wasn't just kind of going to get any earth that was lying around. It was this search took place. It was also important that I just accepted whatever came, to an extent, you know. So that's why there's this range of the colors, from gray through to sort of vibrant red.
Well, I think we were looking, Andy, for like North Dakota was one of the last places, if I remember correctly. And I had a friend of a friend, I think she drove about 2.5 hours to go to a location to get the red dirt for you, but totally happy to do it. I mean, she was like, oh, it's an Andy Goldsworthy project. I'll get in my car and I'll drive. And she was super excited to be part of it.
Yeah, that was,
so, you know, there's a lot of great little human stories. I also know someone in Martha's Vineyard who I think helped you, who, you know, got some illegal dirt as well from a place that probably you're not allowed to get dirt.
It was perfectly legal. And I knew it was there because I'd actually been to Martha's Vineyard. And I have a photograph from 10 years ago where, as a kind of joke for the kids, I rubbed the clay into my hair, you know, and it didn't go for a week or two. You know, I had red hair for a week. So it is a very, it's got a very strong dye to it. And yes, they went there. And you can pick the clay off the beach. You can't pick it up.
Okay, good. Well, we'll inform our mutual friend that everything was good. Andy, thank you so much. It's a beautiful project. I wanted to kind of move into a more discursive moment now and maybe just ask a couple of questions to all of the artists, you know, about some of the projects and about what we've done for Frieze Sculpture. You know, I guess one of the things, and since all of you have been working in and with nature, you know, Ghada with the gardens, Thaddeus, many, many years working with wood. Andy, I mean, your work is so grounded in site specificity and being responsive to the environment and to working with things like stone and water and even wood itself and dirt. What lessons have you learned from nature over the years? I mean, what are the things that nature tells you about aesthetics and about your own work, or maybe even about yourself? So for any of you, any thoughts? Thaddeus, anything from your end?
Well, I think that the beauty of bare trees, and I think Andy is, I have a book of his called Wood, and I was looking at this gigantic tree that I imagined in his backyard or something or whatever, but I think that, just looking at branches, I mean, sometimes I think the logs are so beautiful, I just like to just do nothing, just put them up. But you can't do that because anyone can stand up a log, you know. So, but also I grew up in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, but my father was a miner. So we lived in a place called Number 5 Mine near Grove City. And my dad we used to go walking in the woods to get wild mushrooms. My father knew every plant and so forth. So just being in the woods, and I think that there's nothing, I think that it's a tragedy when I think about how things have just been plowed under and over and so forth for other reasons instead of really building houses that really deal with the natural environment and so forth. But I guess that's economical progress.
Ghada, what about you? I mean, with these garden projects, I mean, obviously, as you explain the origin of them, I mean, kind of being left outside by a curator and saying, you know, no, I'd actually want you to rethink your whole idea of how you make work. I mean, what if the gardens kind of taught you about your own practice and about, you know, how you think about art?
No, I don't know if it taught me something how I think about art, because I've always liked to explore many, many things. But garden taught me, like, what I like about this aspect of garden is really you have to be patient and you have to be very caring about nature, because when you make a garden, you really have to tend to a garden. It's not like an object that I do now some bronzes and as well like this, but the garden, they need somebody who is specifically caring about this this project, and this is very important. It's in terms of like as well giving. You know, I give an idea, but then if you want to have like the piece, you have to take care of it, and this is a lesson for all of us. We have to take care of nature. You know,
but Ghada, one of the things that I would say, because we've worked together also on some of your collaborative projects. I mean, maybe it is the lesson about collaboration, because in some ways you do have to rely, as you were saying, on people to care. And some embedded in these projects is always working with a gardener, working with a landscaper, working with someone who's going to tend the plants, which is a little different than a studio practice and when you're kind of in your studio by yourself.
Yes, and with Reza, for example.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a kind of, I've been thinking a lot about that. And in some ways, maybe why the gardens for you can be successful is because you're already trained in that collaborative method. You've been doing that for a long time, even in works like painting, which are weird, you know, weird to collaborate in a way. No one would think about that.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It was as well by chance that I collaborated with Reza. So it was maybe this is how I am.
Yeah, well, I think you encourage entropy and a kind of sense of, you know, of openness, which I always appreciate about you. And maybe the gardens, in a way, although controlled, also but allow you to kind of work with other people and to be open, to see what's going to happen.
And I like to have the plants of the region. I don't like to take a plant that is rare, and I don't like this kind of things. It really has to be very local and
yeah. Andy, obviously, I mean, you know, as I said, you've been kind of working in the environment, you know, from a really in your student days. I mean, I think probably like 1976. I mean, there's a piece, Stone Sinking in the Sand. I mean, maybe you made that as a student. So, you know, this is now 40 plus years of thinking about this. I mean, what is it that for you kind of, you know, you describe something, the energy of human making in that symbiotic relationship between the artist and the environment. I mean, you don't leave an environment as is. You're always kind of moving something, manipulating something, but it could be quite subtle. What lessons do you think you've learned, you know, from all these years of kind of doing the work that you do?
Well, I think it's important to realize that the reason for making things is not because you feel I can improve on what's there. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, it's not the point, but we feel as human beings a deep need to engage with the world around us, to understand it. And art is an amazing tool for looking, for opening your eyes and feelings. And as a sculptor, the physical engagement with materials is so important. The difference between just looking and touching and feeling and working is huge. You know, I have such a sense of American Earth now through my fingers.
Yeah.
And the colors, they're in my fingernails now. I mean, my hands are red because of all the clay and soils that I have left over. I'm making to kind of earth snowballs, and that's what I'm doing after this. I did it before. So that's an important thing, the reason why we make things. And when the land is the subject matter, it's a huge and important. So it's probably the only subject, really, nature. You know, and nature for me isn't in the way that you described it earlier, that you're finding nature, or you're going out to nature. Nature for me is right in the middle of New York. It's right there. It's in the streets. It's in the people. It's in the places. It's in the buildings. It's difficult to know its lineage and understand that. And that's what I try to do when I go into a city like New York, is to understand the nature of that place. I mean, these flags are not just cotton or the earth. the wind and the light and the atmosphere of the place and the people moving around them in relationship to them. And I hope they tap into that kind of movement and energy that is a city, and therefore understand its nature.
Yeah, well, I think that they're going to be quite, if I could describe them as phenomenological. I mean, they sit in this site, and definitely when the wind blows and when crowds of people are going to be gathering around, they have a life of their own. They're really going to be embedded and networked into a whole system of history, of almost archaeology of the city itself. And it's incredibly beautiful and important that that can happen. I wanted to kind of ask all three of you a question about, what it means for you to make site-specific sculpture in the public realm in New York City in 2020. Not a political question, but just simply, here we are in the middle of a pandemic. I've been giving a lot of thought to what it means to put up a sculpture park in the middle of COVID. How do we deal with the safety of the public? How do we deal with, the safety of people working on the sculptures? I don't know if you've had any thoughts about that, but maybe Andy, we'll start again with you, and we'll go to Ghada and Thaddeus. You've been working you've been working in sites for many years, but this might be the only project maybe that you'll have outdoors this year. I don't know, maybe you'll move on to something else.
Yeah, I mean, this is also the first project I think I've ever made outside that I've not been there.
Yeah.
I mean, this is unprecedented in my practice that I'm usually, and just to make, I mean, it's probably the furthest reaching work I've ever made. It deals with the whole of America, and yet it's been generated from Scotland, my home. And this was initiated before COVID, before the pandemic, and it is, as a lot of my work is, driven by an instinct, an intuition, and not really understanding where this work will lead me. Mm-hmm. And at this moment, there is really difficult to make complete sense of what's going on. And this is a very difficult time. And I don't feel that I'm able to say, this is what this work means at this moment. But I do know it's absorbing this moment, it's traveled through this moment, it is being ingrained with this moment, and we'll speak about that way beyond this time. How it will articulate this time and what's going on, I'm not entirely sure.
Mm-hmm. No, well, I think the piece is going to accrue meaning. It's so multivalent, and I think there are going to be so many different ways of reading it, but the fact that it was made in 2020, I think it really is going to give it a very important historical specificity, and also the way that it was made and the network of people that were involved in it. It's going to be fascinating to see this piece live on into the future and how it will be interpreted, because I think it's a major work, and it's an incredible thing, and it speaks to so many different aspects of both the ecological crisis, of political crisis, of science, the pandemic itself, the way that we have to work today. So it'll be interesting to see. Ghada, what about you? I mean, this piece could be celebrating the 100 years of women's suffrage, which was happening in 2020. I mean, what's your thoughts about putting this project up in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of New York?
I am so happy always to do outdoor projects that I would have done it pandemic, cholera, COVID. Like really. So, I really, for me, it's each time it's an occasion to experiment and to see how it will work in this, because it's always like site specific, culture specific, very political. Sometimes, as well. Sometimes I heard to a lot of people saying no, for my garden, because they are extremely political. It's like the most political part of my work are my garden. So it's just I would have done it COVID, no COVID.
Yeah, that wasn't a concern for you. No, but I think it is interesting. I mean, the context of putting the idea of women's qualities, the words themselves that are chosen, the location of the work. I'm interested to see how people will react to it, and I think it will, again, because it's made in 2020 in a very as you were saying, post Me Too, at least in the United States, the words themselves have changed since the first time you did the project. So again, your piece also is accruing meaning as you redo it. And probably if you did it in 10 more years, it would be a different set of words.
Yeah, or somewhere else. This is all of my garden like this. They are very different. It's the same idea sometimes, but when I reinstall them, it has another meaning.
Thaddeus, what about for you? I mean, you're obviously have 3 beautiful bronze sculptures outside on Fifth Avenue. I mean, what's the feeling for you of putting up a sculpture in the public realm in New York in 2020 at the age of 94? Feel good?
Well, I'm going back to maybe year 2000. I did 7 12-foot staffs for a Spoleto Festival at a Drayton Hall plantation down in the woods where they buried slaves. And of course, these were unmarked. But these 12-foot staves, when they went up, they wanted to know if I wanted to cut the trees. And I says, no, I want them to go up right into the trees. This is about spirituality. And this is what I feel about these sculptures that are in New York. They're about spirituality going up in the air. And I think all art is about spirituality. And I think that despite the pandemic and the lockdowns and all of this, I think one thing art can do is raise spirits and spirituality and human consciousness. And I think that I sit surrounded by art, and it's the one thing I always look for, whether it's natural art, which is like parks, trees, and beautiful things they've made to enhance whatever they think nature is. But I think for me, it's the spirituality and the movements of the sculpture in the air in that environment.
Thank you, Thaddeus. I think that's a great way to maybe kind of begin to wrap things up. We're at 11 a.m. now. There were a couple of questions that were.
I'm also just going to say quickly, if all of the attendees obviously are muted, but if you do have questions, please do now write them in the Q&A box, which is located in the bottom center panel of your Zoom presentation. And Brett's going to go through those now and see if there are specific questions for the artist or for him or for anyone that he can help answer. Then yes, we are going to do that right now. Thanks.
And would it be possible that as we are exiting with the questions, could we have that video of the flags again? A couple of people have asked to show that if it's possible. I don't think it was actually playing properly the last time, or maybe it's, yeah, okay, great. So in terms of questions, one question for Ghada was, is there a physical connection between the medium of soil and dirt and painting canvas for you? I think you kind of answered that a little bit about the cactus works, but could you expand on that a little bit? I mean, how do you connect, or do you see a connection between the gardens and the paintings?
I mean, it's like more of the message that I always convey about women, about power, about, it's always the same message in my painting or in my gardens or in my sculpture. So it's just the medium that changes. Mm-hmm. Or there's a big difference between a canvas and a soil, but
what you're thinking about is always the same issues.
Yeah, but it's just seen in a different way or expressed in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a question for any of the artists to answer. How does entropy impact your work? I mean, how gardens are fragile. I mean, Andy, a lot of your work is totally ephemeral. You could be working with ice or leaves on a rock. Thaddeus, your work has its kind of entropy built in since you work a lot with, live wood, so to speak. Do you worry about it? Do you enjoy inviting entropy into the way that you think? So again, anyone can answer that if you have a thought about that.
Well, I'll speak up first. In the sense of, I work with green wood, and as a background, a wood is natural. It has a lot of water in it, and people do all sorts of things. They coat the ends, and also the wood won't crack or check. but you have to deal with the checks. And like Brancusi said, if you're looking at the checks, you're not looking at the wood. So I work around and with the checks, and a lot of times the wood is wrought or it has an odd shape, but that all enhances. So you work with what is natural, and it's difficult sometimes to impose your will or your mechanics on the material. You sort of have to work with the material. Thank you.
Thank you, Thad. Andy or Ghada, any thoughts about entropy?
Well, I had to look the definition of entropy.
Did you find it?
It's something that is not predictable, right? It's
Yes,
like
exactly.
okay.
Yes.
I mean, nature is not predictable, but it is predictable as well. And as I said before, it's just the care that we put that is very important.
Mm-hmm. Andy, any thoughts about entropy in relationship to your work?
Well, I did.
I mean, which your whole work, maybe your whole body of work is about entropy.
I think that it's the making of the work, or you create this thing that's going to have a life, and it's a question of what kind of life it will have, and that's the beauty of a project like this. This isn't the this is the beginning of its life. And if we were, that's why I asked you last week about what the weather forecast would be.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, I wasn't concerned about you being out in the rain, but I know that if it rained heavily for the first week of the flags, it'd be beautiful, but the color would drain a little more, and it would be very nice if they had this moment of intense color, because the color is so changeable. The red will come and go. The flags will at times be sleeping and at times awake, sometimes almost violent and other times very, very restful, and the red is the same. It pulsates depending upon the light and the day. So all those kind of things are what gives it life and what I look forward to. And my one regret about not being there now is that I'm not going to learn from that and see that in the context of the Rockefeller Center. And had I been there, I'd be there at dawn, at dusk, and see, those moments when the light would just come through the buildings and catch a flag or the flag stuff. These are the things I love and live for, and in lieu of that, I flew them each flag in Scotland, and that was a great thing to do as well. So, you find a way.
Well, you did make these beautiful videos that you shared, and someone did want to ask, what are you planning on doing with those films?
Well, the whole Red Flags project has generated a lot of work apart from the flags themselves. And if I had been in New York now, I would be not just documenting. Photography for me is a way of really looking at the work and creating another work out of that work. It's not made for film, but the film comes out of that. And so it generated these films of each flag flying every day, and I've edited it together, 3 minutes for each flag. It's an hour or 2 hours long, and it's not meant to be watched as a movie, but it's meant to be seen as a painting of sculpture just flying. And I have to see where they will go. I think they will accompany each flag if they go on to elsewhere, because when they come down from the flagpole, they will have the memory of having been there. They will be worn. If you have a hurricane, they'll all be kind of torn and tattered. I imagine they'll start to fray. They'll go pale at one end. If they whip against each other at the end, that gets this coloration, and they will go on to have a life after this, and maybe the film will accompany them. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest.
Well, you did mention something to me the other day. If there's anyone out there who's on this call and you own a drive-in movie theater, Andy really wants to show these at a drive-in movie theater.
It's not that I want people to go and sit there in their cars and watch them. I just love the idea of the flag fluttering over the American landscape. And, you know, when the theater's closed, I don't care, just as long as it, just this very serene, surreal sort of movement in the, yes, I would love that.
It's a beautiful idea, and I really hope we're able to find someone with a drive-in movie theater that will let you screen the
In
film.
every state.
Yeah, in every state, exactly. So I want to thank all of the artists, Thaddeus Mosley, Ghada Amer, Andy Goldsworthy, for being with us this morning. Andy in Scotland, Ghada just flew into Paris and into France yesterday, and Thaddeus is in Pittsburgh. I want to thank Loring again from Frieze, who really has given me a lot of trust in doing this project for the second year. Also the team at Rockefeller Center and Tishman Speyer, who's been amazing to work with, Lorna and Michaela, who also have been incredibly supportive. It's really a huge honor to put up and to make culture at this scale in New York City and to work with artists of this caliber. And I'm very pleased and honored to be able to do this and hopefully to bring beautiful and great and thought-provoking art to the middle of New York at a complicated and difficult time. So I'm going to turn it back over to Lauren, who's going to kind of sign us off.
Yes, I just wanted to say a few things. One, we are recording this talk. It is going to be edited and posted to frieze.com. So I encourage you, if you wanted to go back over, you know, anything that was said today, or you have, even if you have further questions for the artist or for us, you can feel free to email us at events@frieze.com, and we will do our best to answer those questions. Thank you again to everybody, and hopefully at some point in the future, we'll be able to see all of you soon.